Hello, YouTube. It is your boy GZTV. Good evening. Welcome back to the X-Men Marathon. What the fuck happened? I mean, seriously, I'm gonna put it out there. This is not going to be a very positive review because we have X-Men Apocalypse. This movie is a fucking apocalypse. It is a fucking shitstorm. Which came off of X-Men Days of Future Past, which I gave a 9.2 out of 10. That was probably my favorite movie in this franchise so far. It was ambitious. It looked incredible. It combined two generations of X-Men. It had the Sentinel, time travel, Quicksilver, Wolverine, Mystique, Magneto, Professor X. There was a ridiculous amount of stuff happening, and somehow they made almost all of it work. And then we get X-Men Apocalypse, and I'm sorry, this movie is kind of fucking trash. Matter of fact, I think this might be the worst X-Men movie I've watched so far. I know a lot of people talk about Wolverine Origins or whatever. No, I don't even know if I can blame Bryan Singer entirely, because this is the same guy who directed X2 in Days of Future Past. Clearly, this dude can make a great X-Men movie, but this is absolute slop. I am not a fan of this movie at all. It's not even that every idea is terrible. There are actually some really cool concepts buried in this movie, and there is a good movie in a different universe hiding behind all of this. The problem is that almost none of them made me give a shit. It's 2.5 hours of characters, CGI, destruction, mutant powers, ancient Egyptian shit, explosions, things flying around the screen, and eventually, okay, I'm just sitting there. What am I supposed to care about? So let's get into this movie, I guess. So getting into the premise, this takes place about 10 years after Days of Future Past. We kind of jump into the 1980s. It's a very interesting decision, by the way, how they handled that. Apparently, we're just going to keep jumping a decade every movie. I don't know why. This time, an ancient mutant named N'Saba-Nur, or Apocalypse, is awakened after thousands of years. He's basically considered the first mutant and has survived throughout history by transferring his consciousness into other mutant bodies and collecting their abilities. I mean, that is cool. As a villain, at the core, I think that's pretty awesome. Apocalypse wakes up, looks at modern civilization, basically decides humanity has fucked everything up, kind of acting like an old head. That's basically the villain of this movie, is an old head to the extreme. So he wants to destroy the current world and rebuild it with the strongest mutants alongside him. Meanwhile, Charles Xavier has rebuilt his school. Mystique has become something of a mutant hero after the events of Days of Future Past. Magneto is living a quiet life in Poland. We're introduced to younger versions of characters like Cyclops, Jean Grey, Storm, and Nightcrawler. Eventually, Apocalypse recruits Magneto, Storm, Psylocke, and Angel as his Four Horsemen, which is a pretty famous thing in the comic books apparently. And the X-Men have to stop him from basically resetting civilization. Sounds massive. Unfortunately, I barely cared about this movie. Let's get into the good. We're gonna start with things I actually enjoyed, because there are some. I think Quicksilver is still a pretty fucking awesome character, and this is going to be a unique review because I'm not gonna start it with Wolverine, because Wolverine's really not that big of a part of the movie. Evan Peters doesn't necessarily steal the movie or anything, but he's easily one of my favorite characters here. And obviously they knew everybody loved the Pentagon sequence in Days of Future Past, because they said, let's do it again, let's run it back, let's, take the same formula, reiterate what we did. This time the mansion is exploding and Quicksilver goes around saving everybody in slow motion. Is it as good as the Pentagon scene? Absolutely not, because I do think the Pentagon scene is up there with my favorite scenes in this entire franchise. It feels like they're rinsing and repeating something that already worked, but it's still fun and charming. Evan Peters makes it work. Again, I've said this before, I love Evan Peters as an actor, and I actually think they gave Quicksilver a pretty balanced role in this movie compared to the previous one. I don't need him taking over the entire story. He works really well in doses. I don't really give a shit about the reveal that Magneto is his father, though. I will admit that was kind of stupid, even though, again, that's how it works in the comics. They didn't make me care enough. They didn't build anything up to that. They didn't show any, backstory or whatever. Apparently, that's part of the lore, which is fine, but within this movie, it just feels forced to me. He knows Eric is his father and doesn't tell him, and okay, I mean, whatever. Just don't care about that storyline at all. Quicksilver himself, again, is still a great character. Mystique was another character I really liked. I think those are probably my two favorite characters in this entire movie. Jennifer Lawrence is in this really interesting position now, because after Days of Future Past, Raven has basically become a symbol for mutants. People look up to her, and considering she used to be one of the most mischievous characters in this franchise, that's actually a pretty cool reversal that they pulled off. She's almost uncomfortable with being viewed as a hero. I don't necessarily love Mystique becoming a leader of the X-Men, but I think that what they do with her here is fine. Jennifer Lawrence continues to be one of the better parts of this younger cast, and I think she is better than Rebecca Romijn, even though Rebecca Romijn does a serviceable job. Nicholas Hoult is still good as Beast. I think Beast is another pretty good character in this movie. He's more in the background, but I like Hoult in the role. Nightcrawler, I would say, is a positive overall. Cody Smith-McPhee gives him this awkward, nerdy, almost innocent personality I actually liked. I actually liked how they tackled his character here. Do I prefer him to Alan Cumming in X2? Absolutely not. Yeah, Alan Cumming is my Nightcrawler, but this version more than works, and his teleportation continues to be one of the better mutant looking abilities in these movies. And then obviously Wolverine we could also talk about as well. Probably should have put this in the mix because he's not really a big part of the movie, but he basically gets an extended cameo as Weapon X, but I think that was a pretty cool touch. After actually watching Origins and all of the stuff he's been involved in, I obviously have way more context for Weapon X now, and I think that's really cool. And seeing Hugh Jackman come out looking absolutely feral and start fucking everybody up was pretty fun. The claws even looked better. I think they definitely made some improvements on his CGI there. I mean, thank God. Come a long way from the origin claws. Did Wolverine need to be in this movie? Not really. Absolutely not. There's a completely legitimate version of Apocalypse where Wolverine never appears and nothing important changes. But his fan service, it absolutely worked for me. Being partially restoring his memories didn't really do anything for me, and then Logan basically runs off into the woods. Whatever. Just a cameo. That's kind of what I see it as. I'll take it. There are also a few concepts involving Magneto that I like more in theory than execution. Eric trying to disappear and live a normal life in Poland is cool. We've almost seen Wolverine do something familiar. This guy who's been through all this horrible shit just wants a wife, a daughter, a job, and a normal existence. Then that's taken away from him. Unfortunately, we don't spend enough time with his family for their deaths to really destroy me emotionally. Obviously, watching a woman and child die is pretty messed up, but I barely knew these people. So, Fassbender kind of just sells it as well as he can. I don't think this is remotely his best performance as Magneto. Matter of fact, I think this is probably his weakest of the 3 movies I've watched him in so far. Taking Magneto back to Auschwitz and having him destroy the camp is also a powerful idea. It calls directly back to First Class in his childhood. I just wish it happened in a better movie, because instead of being completely locked into the moment, part of me is sitting there thinking about how corny everything around it is. The character designs are another positive. As much as I'm going to shit on the CGI, I actually think most of the costumes look decent. They have that balance between comic book theatricality and something resembling realism. Even Apocalypse himself looks pretty cool. Oscar Isaac doesn't look ridiculous to me. He's very theatrical. Psylocke looks cool. Angel getting the metal wings while Metallica plays is actually a badass little sequence. And Olivia Munn as Psylocke, I mean, she looks gorgeous. That's probably the most memorable thing I can tell you about Psylocke in this movie, though. They barely give her anything to do, but she looks cool. So there you go. And I actually like the ending where Mystique and Beast are training this new generation of X-Men. That's pretty cool. You have Cyclops, you have Jean, you have Nightcrawler, you have Storm, you have Quicksilver. That's interesting to me. That's the movie I almost wish we were building towards instead of spending 2.5 hours watching Apocalypse talk about being a god. So there are pieces here. There's absolutely a version of X-Men Apocalypse that works. We just didn't get it, so let's rip the band-aid off. Getting into the bad, unfortunately, there is a lot. Let's start with Apocalypse himself, because I think he would legitimately be my least favorite major villain in this franchise so far. And even if you put him in the MCU, he would probably be one of the worst villains they've had. And that's crazy because the concept inherently isn't terrible. The first mutant, an ancient being who's existed for thousands of years, transferring his consciousness into different mutants and collecting their powers, I'm sure that was epic in the comic books. It's cool. Then the movie starts in ancient Egypt, and I'm immediately sitting there like, oh god, we're doing an Egyptian supervillain? This aesthetic just feels so out of place compared to what I've been watching. And once Apocalypse wakes up, his motivation basically becomes generic supervillain bullshit. Humanity is weak, civilization is corrupt, only the strong should survive. Destroy everything, rebuild the world, blah 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 blah. I don't care. Oscar Isaac is obviously a decent actor, even though I'm not super familiar with his work. They bury this dude underneath makeup, effects, and this corny ass modified voice where every time he starts giving another speech you just think, oh my god, please shut the fuck up.
They built will fall, and from the ashes of their world.
It sounds so dumb. The Sentinels weren't even traditional characters, and I found them considerably more threatening. Stryker and Magneto are obviously better villains. Apocalypse technically has enormous power, but being powerful doesn't automatically make you interesting. And that summarizes one of my biggest problems with this entire movie. Spectacle does not automatically equal entertainment. There is so much happening on screen. Metal flying everywhere, buildings collapsing, Cairo getting destroyed, Magneto manipulating Earth's magnetic field, Apocalypse using all these abilities, people teleporting and flying and explosions. CGI, CGI, CGI. I just don't care. That's the problem. It's not that the effects are technically horrendous. This isn't Origins Wolverine where I'm staring at Logan's claws wondering how somebody approved them in the studio. The CGI here is technically more polished, but I can see it everywhere. This movie feels so artificial. It feels like an AI movie, even though a decade ago, AI wasn't really that prominent. It feels like I'm watching actors surrounded by computers rather than characters existing in an actual environment. And I understand this is a fantastical concept. It's not even close to plausible, but still, it's such a massive downgrade from Days of Future Past. That movie felt epic. This movie just feels expensive. There's a difference. If this came out when everybody was first freaking out about AI generated video, there are sequences where I genuinely think people would accuse them of using AI. There's just shit morphing and flying around everywhere. It's visual noise, and that absolutely kills the action for me. Magneto manipulating Earth's magnetic field should be one of the coolest displays of power I've ever seen. Instead, it's just like, okay, cool, more shit flying around. Cairo getting destroyed. whatever. By the third act, I'm kind of just numb to it all, just kind of numb to what they show me on the screen. That's terrible, because we're talking about a world-ending event, and I'm barely reacting. And then the Four Henchmen, I mean, what a waste. Magneto, Storm, Psylocke, Angel, it's a really cool lineup. They all are really cool-looking characters, and I'm sure, even though they didn't touch on the backstory, they all have pretty good backstories. What do they actually do with it? Not nearly enough. Angel's transformation into Archangel is cooler than basically anything they actually do with Archangel afterwards. I don't even think he's really involved with the movie after. Psylocke is memorable because Olivia Munn looks incredible in the costume. Storm is probably my least favorite version of Storm so far. And Magneto is Magneto. That's basically it. The movie keeps introducing concepts that sound cool when I describe them and then doing almost nothing interesting with them. That's Apocalypse in a nutshell. And I really don't care for these younger versions of Cyclops and Jean either. Ty Sheridan and Sophie Turner are fine. But I liked James Marsden and Famke Janssen considerably more. I understand they had to have a young casting because this is going back in time. But that's where I start asking, why are we going backward again? First Class worked perfectly as a prequel because it showed us Xavier and Magneto's origin. Great. Days of Future Past and combined both generations. Even better. So why are we now jumping out of their decade and recasting even more characters, getting even more people involved with the franchise? I don't know if they're looking to get asses in seats at this time. I don't know. I went into this almost expecting Stewart and McKellen again after Days of Future Past, and instead we're going even deeper into the past. And we're apparently going to keep doing it. It's just a weird direction for me. And most importantly, the story itself is just simply not interesting. The concept of this movie is just not interesting. That's the biggest weakness. I can forgive mediocre CGI and corny dialogue and goofy comic bullshit. Make me care. This movie did a terrible job at making me care. I know this section probably isn't even as long as I should have made it, but oh my fucking god, like, I don't care about the movie. I think if you want to like take something out of the negatives here, I don't care about this movie at all. So getting into the okay, there are a bunch of things that kind of fall somewhere in the middle despite me of somewhat being overly negative, even though my negatives are really just generalities that I hate about the movie. The movie is just negative in general. But Magneto's story, on paper, it's actually pretty good. Eric has attempted to move on. He has a family and loses them and returns to Magneto. Apocalypse exploits his grief, kind of uses it to like get in his head and give him like this re-villainous origin story again. Charles refuses to give up on him, and again, that's kind of like the moral compass situation that we kind of saw most prominently really in First Class. Eventually Eric comes back around. I mean, that's perfectly functional, but we've been through variations of this Magneto arc so many times already. Eric tries, gets angry, does some horrible shit. Charles believes they're still good in him. Eric comes back around. I mean, eventually you've got to give me something else. And considering how much worldwide destruction he's helping cause here, the redemption is pretty fucking convenient. But Charles and Eric have such a strong established connection that I can at least buy a little bit and forgive Charles refusing to abandon him. The 1980 setting is also just okay. I don't think they really executed that era of pop culture like they should have. Compare this to First Class. That movie felt like its period. Days of Future Past felt like the 70s. Here, it's kind of just more Easter eggs. Return of the Jedi. Pac-Man. Look, guys, it's the 80s. We got the aesthetic. We got the most basic bullshit you've ever seen in that era. I mean, it's cool, okay, but I never felt like the decade became a part of the movie's identity the way the previous period pieces did. The runtime is a little odd to them, a little mixed on how long this movie is. I don't know if I necessarily say I was sitting there checking the clock because the movie drags horribly. It's more, I wasn't interested. I mean, the movie doesn't drag really. Like, they do what they need to do for the concept they're going for. It's just not in an interesting fashion. And when a movie's almost 2.5 hours long and I'm not invested in the story, obviously I'm eventually going to feel the runtime. Jean Grey finally unleashing her power against Apocalypse is also fine. I guess like we could get into the execution of her character. Actually, conceptually, I like it. We're starting to see just how powerful Jean really is. And they show that Phoenix imagery behind her. Obviously, it's a little corny, but it establishes exactly where we're heading with Dark Phoenix. You know, in retrospect, knowing that Dark Phoenix is the next movie, they're going to do exactly what they tried to do with Last Stand, but probably like on a more elevated level. We'll see. God help me for that movie, by the way. And Mora getting her memories restored, actually a decent little moment. I had basically forgotten why I was supposed to care about Mora McTaggart from First Class, which probably says something in itself, but seeing these memories come back reminded me of that relationship. It's sweet and fine, and new X-Men being trained at the end, again, that's cool. Like, I'm not excited for Dark Phoenix after this, especially considering everything I've heard about that movie. I'm more just interested. Like, at least they're getting me interested with that ending. I need to see how this thing ends just for that fact. So getting into the review, X-Men Apocalypse is a massive disappointment. And maybe it feels even worse because I watched it immediately after Days of Future Past. We went from hero to zero. It took an insane number of characters, 2 different timelines, time travel, historical elements, and one of the biggest threats that the X-Men had ever faced, and somehow balanced everything in Days of Future Past. This movie feels like they looked at the success of that and learned the completely wrong lesson. They thought, oh, let's just go fucking bigger than that movie. No. More mutants and destruction and powers and CGI, a bigger villain, destroy the fucking world. And they forgot the part where I need to actually care. This honestly reminds me of the X-Men's version of Age of Ultron. I actually think Age of Ultron is a better movie than this, of course. You follow something that feels like this enormous franchise event, and suddenly you've got another world-ending villain, another massive ensemble, and another ridiculous CGI climax. Except Apocalypse isn't interesting enough to carry that. There are good pieces, obviously Quicksilver and Mystique and Nightcrawler and Weapon X, Wolverine, Fassbender's still great. The costumes aren't bad. This new lineup is decent. They're pieces. They don't form a compelling movie, so because of that, I am giving this a 4.8 out of 10. That is the worst X-Men movie I've watched so far. It's not completely irredeemable as a film. There are enough characters, visuals, and individual sequences that I enjoyed to keep it from being complete garbage, but as an overall movie, nah. This shit did not work for me. I'd never want to go back and watch this again. Right now, I think it is worse than X-Men Origins Wolverine. I know that's a hot take, but that is crazy. We went from my favorite movie to my least, which is kind of ridiculous in a one film stretch and a one video stretch. So with that being said, as always, it has been your boy GZTV. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. As always, giving you guys these reviews. X-Men Dark Phoenix is going to be next on the agenda. Make sure you follow the socials. Then we're going to be getting into the Blade trilogy, and then we're watching Killers of the Flower Moon. Just got done with that book. So with that being said, peace out, everybody.